Welcome to Paranormal or Reality. On today's video, we explore some haunting stories from the Appalachian woods. Now make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this. Let's begin. The best way to start this is by stating that this is a series of events that I have experienced throughout my 27 years of life, living in the Appalachian region of rural Southwest Virginia. Some have just been feelings, while others have left me unable to be outside after dark, which, as many of you may know, is something that you never do when you live as deep in the mountains as I do. First, I will go back as far as I can remember to when we had just started living in the house that we still currently live in. In the grand scheme of things, our house is really not that old. If I remember, it was built somewhere around the 60s or 70s. When my grandparents bought the house, we moved in and started experiencing stuff. They weren't bad experiences, don't get me wrong. Mainly things being moved, shadows out of the corner of my eyes, strange smells and sounds. Nothing I would call bad, just strange. My mother and father had moved a trailer onto my grandparents' property at that time. My mother, unlike my granny and myself, is very much a skeptic. I vaguely remember her always brushing off Granny, telling her about the strange smells and other things happening around the house. Until one day she was by herself at the trailer. My brother and I were at school. Granny was at work. My grandpa was most likely in his recliner at the house. Something to know about where the trailer sat at the time: we own a few acres of land with a creek running about halfway through it, splitting the land that we lived and worked on from the land that was almost entirely mountainside. The trailer was sat at the very edge of the property by the creek. There was about half an acre of land between the house and the trailer. My mother, who was home alone, started smelling a man's aftershave. Could potentially mark that up to my father. Except he didn't wear anything like that when he was alive. Not that he didn't like it. That stuff just never smelled good on him. So, it wasn't my father. My grandpa was at the house on the other end of the property. She just couldn't figure out where this clove-like smell was coming from. Things went on like that for a long time. Objects being moved, the smell of a man's aftershave, all of it. Finally, I don't know what prompted it, my grandparents decided to get the house wiring checked out. Turns out that the house had been wired with the same kind of wires that were used in coal mines. Most of the wires were bad. Strangely, once the wiring was fixed, all the strange happenings in the house and property stopped. Granny still says to this day that the previous owner was looking out for us. Now, we're going to skip forward a few years. By this time, my mother has divorced my father, given up custody of me and my brother to our grandparents. I'm still at the age that playing outside in the dirt and creek is the most fun a southern child can have. I made myself a little place across the creek in a little thicket to play in. It was a good, quiet place for a child to play. There's always a feeling that comes with being watched. There are different feelings to being watched, and this feeling I got, even as a child, was not a welcoming nor friendly sort of watching. I never found out what it was, nor have I gone back to that little spot I used to play in. Even approaching the area gives me such a sense of dread and apprehension that I have never been able to shake. A few years later, my younger brother and I were living with my mother and her new husband. I wanted to decorate my new room, so we went to the local flea market where I bought a clock and a painting to hang up in my room. Now, before these items entered the house, it was just a normal house. But afterwards, doors were opening on their own, items being moved, my cat refusing to leave my side, my things gone missing only to show up in other rooms, sleep paralysis, a tall, dark shadow moving in the corner of my eye, voices. It was awful, and a time in my life I never want to revisit. I distinctly remember lying in bed with the cat. My light was on. I had my CD player blaring music. The usual teen things when out of nowhere, it felt like something kicked the edge of my bed. I'm not talking a light kick like someone trying to get my attention. I'm talking hard enough to scoot my bed several inches to the side. There were nights where I'd be lying in bed, my door cracked because of course I had the room with no windows, and I have always had a slight fear of pitch black. I'd be there on my side so my face was facing the door. Now, something to know about me is that I have awful vision. Without my glasses, I can only see clearly a few inches in front of my face. This doesn't mean, however, that I can't see movement. I believe that it's far more terrifying to only be able to see a dark blur moving towards you than to clearly see what that blur is. We didn't stay long in that house and was forced to move not long after. And during the move, I was forced to leave the clock behind. Oddly enough, the strange happenings stopped. Now, we skip a bit more forward in time. I'm an adult now and have had more experiences now that I'm back in my hometown, in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains. Everything from hearing a woman outside in the middle of the night in January calling hello over and over, to being outside at night smoking and getting the overwhelming feeling that if I didn't get inside immediately, that something would attack me, to the crickets outside going quiet and the fear of turning around to look out the window for fear of what may be looking in. Let me lay out the background. I am in the south hiking the Appalachian Trail. I am unsure of the exact location. It was after Georgia northbound, but still southern parts of Virginia. I tried doing some research, and I couldn't find much information other than the Bell Witch, and that is the opposite side of the state. So I am hiking along with my pal Centaur. It is a clear day and no sign of rain. Nothing but blue skies. We are pretty distant from any town or even road for that matter. The forest is clear of underbrush and nothing but bare trees. We could easily see beyond 400 yards. About 200 yards away up on the hill, we both saw a brunette woman gazing off in the distance, not looking towards us. This is extremely odd for this terrain, so my pal and I called out to her, "Hey ma'am, are you lost?" The woman keeps her torso still and jerks her head towards us. The speed and angle of her head turn should have broken her neck. She let out a sharp, ear-piercing scream, almost like a banshee from those old stories. We ran as fast as we could with 40-pound packs on our backs. As we are running away, the wind picks up heavily, nearly hurricane levels. Branches are snapping and we even heard a tree fall in the distance. The rain started pouring. Sideways rain, strong wind. I know the weather can change like a dime in the mountains, but this just felt different, like we were cold. From 80+ degrees to nearly 60 or less with wind chill that was constant. Other hikers were caught in the rain as well. They were as confused we were. We couldn't tell them what we saw. We couldn't even explain it to each other. We never mentioned it again. We both knew we had saw her. We continued on the trail. I have had several paranormal experiences. Perhaps it runs in the family. I grew up in the Appalachian Mountains of Virginia, in a long, deep hollow. Superstition runs as deep as the hollows. You grow up with it. It's second nature. You don't think it's strange or weird because everyone believes it and everyone has a story to tell. A willow branch will find water. You shiver. Someone has walked on your grave. You put salt on windowsills, blue bottles in trees. You knock on wood and always say, "You aren't welcome here" when you answer the door and no one is there. You don't question it. You just do it because it keeps you safe. Safe from what? Things. Unexplained things. My mother grew up in an old house in the back of a place called the Cove. A long hollow, deep in the mountains. You won't find it on map. It's a local name for a small part of the area. When she was a child there, her blankets would be pulled off of her. She would say, "I'm cold," then it would stop. Footsteps used to stomp up on the steps at night. Until one night her father yelled out, "You need to stop all that stomping." She said the footsteps stopped, and they never heard them again. At night. They eventually moved out to another house. An old man moved in after them. The neighbors, a bit down the road, said the man came running to their house in the middle night, asking if he could sleep there. He said he wasn't staying in that house another night. He wouldn't say what happened to him, but he never went back to that house. My father claims he was followed by what he called the Wood Witch. I don't know what that may be, but I have heard my grandma talk about the witch. She said it would scream at night where she lived as a child. Gave her the chills. Her father would pace the floor when they heard it screaming. My grandma said her father thought it was a bad omen when the Wood Witch was screaming. My dad said he was walking home from the fair. He heard something behind him. It was a bright night, but he couldn't see anything. He kept walking, heard it again. He turned and saw a tall, dark shadow. He just knew it was up to no good, so he hightailed it out of there with the witch following behind him the entire time. When I was little, we lived in an old home. It was over 100 years old, and it didn't have a bathroom. We used an outhouse and washed in a basin. My mom called it a whore bath. There was 2 large bedrooms upstairs. One of those was mine. I can clearly recall talking to an older lady. We sat on my bed. She was telling me this was her bedroom at one time. She was even born in that very room. She loved that house, as much as I did and still do. I wasn't scared at all. She was my friend. I was later told there was no such woman. It was all in my imagination. But it wasn't. We used to play in the mountains. Once we were swinging on a grapevine. That is what we called them. Those large, thick vines which grow up the trees. You cut it off at the bottom, hang on for dear life, take a run and swing out. Pray it doesn't break. It can be like flying if you find a good one, which will swing out over the hill. We were swinging hard. We had found the perfect grapevine. You went out high into the sky, could almost touch the clouds and see the valley bottom. We kept seeing a house down in the bottom, but there wasn't a house there. Never had been. Maybe someone built it, or it was new, but we had never noticed it. We went to investigate, being the adventurous little mountain devils we were. We couldn't find it. Went back to swinging, saw the house, went searching, couldn't find it. This happened several times. When we went home, each of us asked our parents, but we were all told not to go to that house and to stop searching for it. We were forbidden, never given explanation for it. We didn't see the house again. When I was in 1st grade, my teacher passed away suddenly. You heard the other teachers, parents, talking about in whispers. I was in class and went to the bathroom. On my way back, I saw that teacher, the one who had passed away. She was standing at the end of the hallway. I was getting ready to go back into the classroom about halfway down the hall. She was just standing there, looking so sad. I felt horrible, like I wanted to cry. I was so sorry for her. The look on her face, she was so sad. It looked as if she missed her life now that it was gone. My first encounter was when I was just 5 years old. My family traveled to Louisiana to visit my dad's family. This house sits right down the road from where Bonnie and Clyde were gunned down. It was a huge old home, maybe built in 1880s. It sat right across the street from an old church. Anyways, that night my great-aunt made a pallet on the floor in front of this huge window in the living room, and off to the right was a long dining room with the bathroom on the back wall. As the night went on, everyone was asleep. I woke up in the middle of the night, having to use the restroom. As I get up to go, I look towards the bathroom, and standing clear as day is this young lady. She was translucent gray with long curly hair, wearing a Victorian-style nightgown. I felt fear and very uneasy, so I jumped underneath the blanket covering my whole body. Then all of the sudden I got so cold, I ended up peeing on myself. Next day I didn't say anything. I wanted to go home. Unfortunately, I let my grandfather know that I think there was a hole in the ceiling. Fast forward to 30 years, I finally spoke to both my parents about it. What I didn't know was my mom experienced something that night too. I woke her up asking for water. When she went to lay me down, I was already laying down. She said, "I was looking at both of you in disbelief. You turned around and disappeared right before my eyes." We left the next day to never return. I do want to go back and visit the house as it does still stand. I've always wondered if the new owners have ever experienced anything. Thanks for tuning in. Watch another video if you dare.